Welcome to Broadcast Team Alpha, bringing you cutting-edge conversation while exploring quantum possibilities. Speaking of possibilities, and you know they're limitless, just for tonight, we're going to ask you to suspend your disbelief because with this show, we have a guest that's going to test the outer limits of possibility. Augie, will you tell us about our guest?
Absolutely. Thank you. We have with us today one of the highest profile, believed, and best understood alien abductees in the world. And that is Travis Walton. And he has an incredible experience several decades ago. And there were several witnesses to it. And their story over the years has always been the same. In fact, there were lie detectors tests done, which they passed with flying colors. And that also tells us they're telling the truth. So it is our honor to have with us on the show today, on the Broadcast Team Alpha show, Travis Walton. Welcome to the show, Travis.
Welcome.
Well, thanks for having me.
It's good to be here with you.
There is so much to talk about here, and you have lectured on your incident for decades, and there is a documentary that was done on it, there's a movie that was done on it, and you have traveled pretty much to many corners of the world spreading this message that we are not alone. But for the ones that don't know you, maybe you could talk a little bit about yourself and how this all happened in the very beginning of it.
Well, in November of 1975, I was at work with 6 other men. We've been working out on this contract for a number of months. It was apparently just an ordinary work day. It's Wednesday. We finished up and it was starting to get dark, and we were loaded up our equipment. We're headed out of there. And we saw this glow coming through the trees. And the name of the movie Fire in the Sky comes from a situation that we had when we were driving to work one day, and there was a light from up above like that. And it was a situation where lightning had hit the tree and caught it on fire up high. And so we stopped and put the fire out. We'd, assisted with firefighting in a number of instances over the years. It's kind of routine that the Forest Service would come and get us because, we're already know how to use the equipment and, know what to do. It figures into the situation in terms of what I later figured out might have been involved in the incident in the first place. Was the high frequency of lightning strikes. It was only a year ago that I did an interview with a show called The Low Files, and Rob Lowe. It was a two-part show, my segment, and then a segment on a lady that dealt in crystals. She sold at gym shows, and what Rob Lowe said was that he said Travis told me that the aliens were in the area mining for fulgurite. Well, that caught me totally by surprise because I didn't know what fulgurite was. I know I'd never said that, but it did turn out to be a very good possibility of what the situation was, because that area of Arizona, the Mogollon Rim area there, has the second highest frequency of lightning strikes of any place in the continental United States. So fulgurite is a substance that's formed when lightning strikes the ground. You've got millions of volts, millions of degrees instantaneously forming crystals that have characteristics completely different from anything you would find created geologically. It's an unusual substance, and according to the crystal lady, have some unusual properties. So I thought that was a pretty fortunate coincidence to learn about this substance and its connection to the high frequency of lightning there. So when we saw this glow coming through the trees, you know, it wasn't all alarming at first. It was just a light. It seemed out of place, and you know, what could that be? And wondering, oh no, you know, process of elimination. It wasn't the sunset, wasn't the moon, wasn't deer hunters camped up there. So when we finally got to where we could see the source of this light, boom, there it was. It was totally astonishing. This disc hovering there less than 100 feet away. Alan yelled out, "It's a flying saucer, it's a spaceship," something like that. There was no mistaking what we were looking at. That's in response to the skeptics' theory that we just saw the planet Jupiter. This was not some little point of light off in the sky. It was a clearly visible, clearly defined metallic disc hovering there. I thought it would take off and be gone almost immediately. It's kind of the, you know, when we encounter wild animals in the woods, that's kind of the standard sort of a thing, you know. If you call the other crew members' attention to it, they're lucky if they can turn their head in that direction in time to see it before it's gone. So I just threw open the door and started towards it. It was just kind of an impulse. It was a foolish impulse.
Another serious one.
Yeah, it was serious, life-changing consequences. Alan, you know, he later said it looked to him like I was in some kind of a trance, like I was just drawn towards it. And Alan come up with that theory. I think he, you know, people would ask him with an accusing tone, "How come you didn't get out?" And you know, in his defense, he would say, "Well, Travis was under mind control. The rest of us were strong enough to resist it." But well, you know, when I turned around and looked at them, they looked pretty astonished themselves. You know. Pretty entranced. So, you know, it was recently suggested to me that if they think I was under mind control, I could challenge them. Maybe they were in mind control not to get out.
Mr. Walton, how does that compare with what was portrayed in the films or documentaries? Did they portray that moment accurately for you? I'd
say that, you know, when the movie portrayed the crew becoming alarmed, swearing at me to get back in the truck. That was all really how it happened, you know. The actual look of the craft, not so much. When Mike said it looked like molten metal coming out of a blast furnace, he was talking about the color of the glow. It was a kind of a golden white. And so they took this molten metal thing and made it look like a swirling pool of lava, and that was not the way it looked at all. It was shiny. It was giving off light, but at the same time reflecting the surrounding trees. I've compared it to when you're looking at the television, which, you know, is glowing. It's giving you a lighted image, but you can also see reflections of light coming in the window off of the television screen. So you're seeing two images at once on a shiny surface like that. But it was it put and clearing in this ethereal glow, a kind of a weird, strange sort of a feeling. The sound it was making was a mixture of highs and lows, off the range of human hearing on both the high and the low end. Wow. And Mike said that sitting there with his hands on the steering wheel, he could feel the vibration of those lower tones in his hands. They said they could feel it in the truck. But the higher notes were a really high-pitched sort of a thing. John described it as an intermittent beeping, but it was more of a real high-frequency sort of I don't know.
Was this similar to what we saw portrayed in Close Encounters, where he's in that utility truck at the railroad crossing and just experiencing incredible power coming from the craft that they portrayed? Was it similar to that?
Yeah, I think so, because it was something that you didn't just hear with your ear, you could feel it in your body.
Wow.
On
That's
the high
end power.
End. And it was intimidating, the sound.
Wow.
A bit frightening. The anxiety in their voices, swearing at me to get back in the truck, it just kind of reached a peak when the sound from the craft suddenly got louder and it moved at the same time. And that was so startling to me that I jumped for cover. And the nearest thing was just a log that I got down behind. It was sticking up. They're, yelling, let's go. I didn't need to be told. I was just it was kind of an impulse to just jump for cover behind that log and then think, how am I going to get out of here and run back to the truck? And
how far away from the truck were you at that point?
I was probably, in 80, 90 feet.
Oh, wow.
So was that the kind of thing where, naturally you were curious and you were compelled to go see what was going on, and then suddenly your reason kicked in, but then something happened, right, that you couldn't go back to the truck?
Yeah. When I stood up to run, that closed the distance. Because, see, when I jumped to get behind that log, I was down and forward. So when I stood up, that was the closest point for me. My head and chest were closest to the craft, and that's when that blast of energy hit me.
Oh, wow.
It was really powerful, and the guys in the truck said that they immediately thought it had killed me. I mean, there was no doubt in their mind, because the power of this thing was like an explosion.
What did it feel like for you? I'm sorry.
Pardon?
I was going to ask you, what did it feel like for you?
It was just a numbing shock. I mostly just lost consciousness, but it literally threw me through the air, quite violently. John described it as my body hitting the ground like a sack of meat, like there wasn't a bone in my body. And they said that Steve yelled out, "It got him," and in his vocabulary, that meant it killed him. It was instantly fatal in their view. And so I've always tried to discourage people from saying that those guys taking off at that point there was nothing cowardly about that. It was the only sensible thing.
That was a fight or flight moment for them.
Yeah, they thought you were dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They said they dang near wrecked the truck escaping, and they stopped some distance up the way. At some point, they said they saw the craft leave the area, but spotting some deer hunters passing by on the main road there, the rim road. They tried to chase them down, because even at that point, Mike was, thinking they were going to have to go back and see if they could help, see if there was some injury that I might have survived that that I needed help for. So when they were unable to catch up to the deer hunters, the idea that they would get rifles and that would be some measure of security, maybe not such a good idea, but that's what they were thinking, they said. I doubt those firearms would have helped that much, but
that just sounds like an incredible amount of power that these people, whoever these people, these ETs are, just an incredible amount of power.
Well, earlier this year, I saw a lightning bolt come out of a clear blue sky. And I'd say, oh, yeah, I've heard that can happen. So it was just a more recent theory that perhaps this craft, having some sort of an enormous EMF or magnetic effect, might have attracted a lightning bolt, which had a secondary discharge to ground through me.
Because you were the tallest object nearby.
Yeah, and maybe not a weapon or anything that they deliberately fired
plain
at me.
old ordinary lightning, yeah.
In the first place.
A lightning rod.
Yeah, kind of a lightning rod. Yeah,
So,
figuratively and literally.
Mr. Walton, I've taken care of patients who have been struck by lightning, and when I was listening to your story, I was wondering if it was an effect like that, because you talked about the EEG, and I was really curious. So it's interesting that you're mentioning the lightning.
Yeah, well, I would be interested in looking at the EEG on people who might have been hit by lightning or subjected to high voltage, working on high tension lines or something.
Yes.
Because when I was returned, I did have an EEG performed, and an unusual pattern was detected that I theorize might be an after effect of this energy having hit me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Have you noticed any changes, or did you notice any changes in your thought processes, or did you have any special abilities suddenly that you didn't have before?
Well, I really like to stick to the things that I can document.
But beyond that,
try to avoid anything controversial because,
I see.
It's important to me for people to accept that, this phenomenon is a very real thing.
Absolutely.
And people need to understand that there's no way that we are alone in the universe, and that it's something that needs to be understood and taken in stride.
Absolutely.
do you feel like you've had any kind of contact or seen anything that in your proximity that may lead us to think that maybe they came back and check on you and see how are you?
Well, I could say yeah, but since I can't document it, like I say, I try to stick to the stuff that I can document. I definitely think that they are perfectly capable of knowing where each of us is.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's any huge feat for them. I use the example of cell phones and how our own comparatively primitive technology is perfectly capable of knowing the location of every one of these cell phones and even recording every single electronic transmission on the face of the earth. And And certainly these beings are far more advanced than our government that's capable of doing that.
Yeah.
So,
do you recall any implants that may have that they may have put in you?
Oh, I had upper body X-rays with the fear that the implants would be discovered, but none were.
So, Mr. Walton,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think I derailed you a little bit. You were talking about when the electromagnetic force or whatever that was hit you, and then is that when you think that you went aboard the craft, or what happened next?
Well, when the crew returned, they did not find my body landing where it had landed. Ken, having seen the craft leave the area, said he wasn't so much afraid that it would come back as to what my corpse was going to look like. Was it going to be horribly charred, or Steve even had the theory that it might have disintegrated me, that I wasn't in one piece. So they were, braced for some pretty horrific sights when they came back, but they were unable to find me. And I believe that I was taken aboard the craft because they were the only ones that would be capable of rescuing me, of correcting the damage. The nearest hospital was over an hour away. It's probably equally far to the Shoal Hospital or the Payson Hospital from that point, and it would have been too late had the crew been able to recover my body. They none of them knew CPR, so it was probably for the best that that these beings took me aboard. It took me many years to confront the actual consequences of being taken, to where I came to call it more of a ambulance call than a abduction.
Wow. So you feel like they helped you?
Yeah.
Wow.
At the time, I was totally traumatized and horrified by the entire experience, and I didn't understand it at all. And the level of fear that I experienced had a whole lot to do with the fact that I did not understand what was happening to me.
Absolutely.
The nearest town where I was returned to was it was curious that they didn't bring me to my own town, my hometown, where I live. I mean, we were talking about implants and the idea of whether they have a means of tracking us. I don't think they need implants to do that. The people who get implants probably have them for other purposes. I think they're perfectly capable of tracking us on the basis of DNA or brain waves or some other factor peculiar to the person, rather than requiring an implanted device.
Mr. Walton, can I just ask you a question? Because I know you mentioned that part of what was so disturbing about the experience was the stare from the aliens that were on the craft. Can you tell us a little bit about what went on when you were on the craft?
Well, it took some figuring to understand the reason that stare was so unbearable. It wasn't just their strangeness, that was horrific. To encounter beings that look nothing like us, and to feel that I'm totally under their power, at their mercy, was a very terrifying situation. But the feeling that I was mortally wounded inside, that there was something wrong, desperately wrong inside, and the feeling of suffocation, the feeling that I couldn't get enough air. And I naturally associated these feelings with their appearance. But I think the stare, one doctor was telling me that his theory was that perhaps their mind control, when they're trying to really focus it, had something to do with the stare, because the eye sockets being the largest opening in the front of the skull, that they were trying to combine forces, combine their power to get me under control. And it wasn't working. The reason it wasn't working is because neurologically I was scrambled, being hit by this blast of energy, just scrambled the brain waves in a way where they would normally have been able to keep me under control or sedate me, get me back on the table, and complete the repairs or treatment, whatever was going on. All that wasn't working because of the neurological effects of this blast of energy.
Understood. Absolutely. Wow.
So, I found the stare, excruciating. It was unbearable. It gave me a kind of a squirmy feeling in my head. It's the best I can describe it.
Yeah.
But sure. It was not comfortable.
Did you feel like you could move, or were you kind of immobilized when you were on the table?
I was unconscious, and as soon as I saw them, the alarm, the shot of adrenaline, the fear, gave me the strength to roll away from them and try to fend them off. Probably not in my best interest. That I really needed to remain under the process that they were providing to me. But I couldn't hold still for them. The fear was just off the chart. And so the human-looking beings that came in and took charge of me, various people have theorized that this was some kind of perhaps a robot or an illusion of some kind that they had concocted, just because just being a type of being that looked more like me, that I was going to be less combative and willing to cooperate with them.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Did they speak with you or say anything that could be understood or communicate in any way?
Unfortunately not. In spite of my desperate, I was, basically babbling and pleading and doing everything I could to get them to respond to me, and of course when I saw the human looking beings, that was renewed hope that that this was actually someone from some Earth agency, maybe Air Force or NASA or something, somebody that was there to rescue me from this situation. But in hindsight, I don't think that was the case, but they didn't seem the least bit inclined to respond to me. At first I thought that the reason he wasn't answering me was because of the helmet he was wearing. Whether that was being worn because to shield him from microbes, or the atmosphere wasn't correct. Maybe that was the reason I was feeling what's the word?
You couldn't get your air. You didn't have the right mixture.
Couldn't get enough air.
Right.
Whether that was caused by lung injury or a neurological injury, or has actually had something to do with the quality of the atmosphere in that craft.
Maybe they didn't know the mix. Maybe they were estimating the mix for the air.
Someone has suggested that maybe he was wearing the helmet because I was combative, but I cooperated sufficiently to where he took me to some other people like him who were not wearing helmets. And
so they took you off the table at some point, and you were walking within their ship?
Yeah.
You got off the table, right?
At this point, the craft was parked inside. I don't know if it was there the whole time, but it was parked inside of this large airplane hangar, or maybe a part of a larger craft. And I was very anxious about where he was taking me, so I was paying more attention to where we were headed than my surroundings. But he took me out of this large hangar-like enclosure down a hallway to a room with some other humans. One of them was female. And it was there that I saw the similarity amongst them was unusual, Just to see one by himself, it would have been somebody that could have passed in a crowd on Earth. But to see them all together, there was a kind of a family resemblance that really makes me lean in the in the direction that they weren't actually Homo sapiens, humans. But their lack of response had me backtracking to the panic that I had experienced before, and I started to resist their efforts to get me on the table and sedated again. But I was in a pretty weakened state, even though, during those years I was in pretty good shape, but I was injured, weakened, and totally outnumbered. And they were able to get me down and put this gas mask over my face that rendered me unconscious.
Wow.
And they continue their repair job then, it kind of sounded like.
Yeah, and so, probably fortunately for me that I wasn't able to resist them.
Yeah.
So you say you don't really remember the surroundings, can you remember anything? Was it a very plain environment, or did it seem human-like?
Yeah. The interior of the craft I woke up in was very utilitarian. It did not seem like something numbers of people would travel a great distance in. It seemed more utilitarian, more like a tool. No place you would eat and sleep and that sort of thing. But
wow.
Very, very high tech.
So I know it's been many years, and when I was preparing to talk with you, and thank you again for being with us, I was wondering, and you may have answered this, what do you think would have happened if you didn't resist, if you weren't, in hysteria? What do you think might have happened?
Well, you're probably wondering if I regret not making better use of an opportunity to communicate.
Well, I don't think that you had the capacity given your physical condition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in hindsight, I wished I had learned more, and people have asked me, if you were to encounter them again, what would be your number one concern, desire to come away with? And that would be, definitely answers to some questions,
Please know that I am not judging you or thinking, oh, why didn't he, like you said in your video, why didn't you take a souvenir? I am not judging you at all. I was just wondering if you had any insights over the years that might have shifted your, your perspective on how it might have been done differently.
Well, yeah, definitely felt like that I'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. I got over the idea that, that I had been attacked or fired upon or, or kidnapped or any of that sort of thing. It was a situation where I got myself into a situation by acting impulsively and unwisely. And I definitely wish it never happened. If I had it to do over again, I'd not get out of that truck.
Have you ever done any hypnotherapy to go back, or?
Yes, Dr. Harder did the initial hypnosis on me, and that was really a milestone in my ability to handle the level of trauma that I was enduring at that time.
Yes.
I had not even finished a sentence in talking to my brother or the sheriff, anybody. I was just so traumatized by the events that I couldn't even speak about it.
Absolutely.
But Dr. Harder's hypnotic technique was very, very exceptional in terms of getting me to relax.
Excellent.
And it was from that point on that I was able to handle the memories of what I had just happened so much better than I had before. The nightmares, that stuff, continued, but it didn't help that I felt this besieged, by the media and the public and things that were being said that people did not know what they were talking about, and many of the theories that people latched onto to try to explain it away, because that's what they were. They were just desperate to please give me some excuse to not believe that this is real, because it's too scary to contemplate. So whatever we can do, we're going to say that this was some kind of a hallucination.
Right.
Dr. Persinger had this theory that plate tectonics could generate what they call earthquake lights. It's kind of a lightning bolt that's formed by shifting geological structures under the earth. And the Moyan Rim area is a fault line, but what that theory did not take into consideration is, how do 7 people have the same hallucination? They just don't understand the nature of psychological effects of the energy, hitting the brain. Sure, something like that you could theorize, something like that happening, but 7 people are not going to have everything the same to the last detail.
Exactly.
And
well, then there was the trauma that they went through while you were gone. They were being pressured and interrogated,
accused of murder, and it was terrible for them, and then of course Mike had quite a bit of guilt about leaving, when the whole crew screamed at him, go, 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 and his instincts, immediately was, there's no point in getting somebody else killed to save a dead man.
Yeah.
So, he did the right thing.
I think it's unfair for people to quarterback it, because you really don't know how you're going to react until that happens to you. I think in all fairness, a lot of armchair quarterbacks might have exactly the same reaction in that situation. So I think that's kind of unfair.
I hear plenty of people saying things like, well, I wouldn't do that. I would stay calm.
You don't know that. Yeah.
I would get a souvenir. I wouldn't take off,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe that would have been the case for some people, but not everybody.
Yeah.
Maybe, but
it's a big maybe. It's entirely speculative for people to say that. They have no basis to say that. So,
and I think
that's because they're kind of in their minds picturing themselves as preparing themselves for something like this. Not that something just out of the clear blue happening. You see somebody killed before your eyes in their view. They behave.
Well, they had to deal with that, and then you had this sheer terror of laying on a table, being surrounded by extraterrestrials. We have no reference point for this in our human experience, other than folks like yourself that go through this. So you had no reference point for even how to communicate with these people, who they were, where they were from. You have nothing.
It's a great point.
This whole hallucination theory, see, once ever, the whole crew passed lie detector tests, and Dr. Harder made the point that if you had 6 witnesses say they'd witnessed a murder, they wouldn't even need a polygraph test. They'd just say, well, that's overwhelming evidence to have 6 witnesses say that. But 6 witnesses that not only have consistent testimony, but also took multiple polygraph tests from state police, skilled interrogators, people who really know the business.
Coming up with the same conclusion every time.
Yeah. And this alternative theory that it was a drug hallucination, like we're going to get high on the job. It's a very dangerous work, and nobody would do that. And I certainly never did. And the medical test proved that. The Maricopa County Medical Examiner's drug screen is the highest level of that kind of forensic research. And there was no trace of any drug in my blood or urine. So,
as well as the other men tested clear as well, right?
I don't. They didn't take that test, but.
Okay.
I'm wondering when you found yourself inside that craft and woke up and saw these little short EBEs standing around there looking at you. Did you have any idea what they might be? Actually, with other words, have you known that these grays existed before, or was this your very first observation that, hey, this is a new species? Did you have any idea that they could exist?
Well, I had an experience as a small child that none of my family would accept. But they all remember it because I absolutely insisted, no, this was not a dream. This really did happen.
And I'm so grateful that you have been persistent in telling your story, because we've come across just a handful so far of people who have had experiences and their lives have been markedly changed, and most of them, 99% of them, not for the better. So I think you're so courageous, and I think that you're helping so many other people to come forward.
Well, I hope that I can, promote the just the basic understanding that this is real. I mean, if you just look at the science behind it, just what the astrophysicists have to say, I point to the fact that back when this happened, anybody who believed that there could be aliens was a kook, because a kook was somebody who believed something at odds with the majority of scientists.
Yeah.
Well, back then they had this thing called the Drake equation. It was an astronomer named Drake, and it was a formula to estimate the number of civilizations in our galaxy, but they had no idea whether every star had planets. So was it one star in 100 or one star in 10? But now, here recently, NASA come out and said, without a doubt, on the basis of direct observation, the Hubble telescope, virtually every star has about a dozen planets. So now they are plugging numbers into the Drake equation that yield far, far higher numbers of civilizations in our galaxy. And the point that Michio Kaku, astrophysicist, made on television year before last was people keep picturing these civilizations as being maybe a few hundred years ahead of us. But based on the age of these star systems, they could easily be hundreds of thousands or millions of years ahead of us. I might also point out they could also be cave people too. They could be primitive people out there. But still, the relative scientific technical progress that they could easily have over us is any scientist who would make a pronouncement about, oh, that's not possible, or to make any pronouncement about what's possible and not possible is the height of arrogance. Stan Friedman wrote a book called "Science Was Wrong," and the history of science is a long list of things where the most learned minds of the day declare things to be impossible that are now ordinary.
Right, they believed at one point that we couldn't go more than 45 miles an hour or we'd suffocate.
Yeah.
Or that we'd never fly.
That was Lord Kelvin come out and said that.
Yeah.
And he was the one who invented the Kelvin temperature scale. So he was a highly respected scientist, but kind of an absurd conclusion he made there. But
I think even regular people, Travis, I think regular people, you don't have to be a scientist to look up in the sky and say, wow, there's got to be other life out there. To think that we're the only thing here that's happening in this little corner of space, it does seem if you just stop and think for a minute, it does seem kind of ridiculous to say that there's nothing else out there, or that these weird lights in the sky, there's nobody, now it's an anomaly, or it's a hallucination, or it's whatever goofball explanation somebody wants to dismiss it with. People are starting to really say, now just wait a minute, my aunt had an experience, or my uncle had an experience, or I had a weird dream. I had this weird dream. More and more people are starting to come forward with their experiences. And so you were the trailblazer in an era, 75, I was a junior in high school, and I can remember at best you could watch Star Trek. And if you watched Star Trek, that immediately put you into a fringe on the edge of geekdom at the time. And so I know what you're talking about. That really didn't earn me any friends other than a couple when I was in high school that I would be into science fiction. So I know exactly what you're talking about in that time frame.
Well, one concept that they came up with on that show was that non-interference directive, the prime directive.
Exactly.
It makes perfect sense that an advanced civilization, an advanced technology would be, if they were moral, would be reluctant to just come upon a less developed civilization and just dump high tech on them. It's proven destructive in the history of Earth. Every time we've had people
our
get
own
on
inventions,
ships,
you're right. When we go into other countries and do the same thing, you're right. Yeah.
It was always very destructive to the less developed civilization. So the skeptic theory that, well, if there was anything to this, they would land and say, here's a brand new box of matches, go play. Don't understand.
They're smarter than that, is what it is.
Yeah, and I disagree with the idea of evil aliens plotting to take over the Earth. I don't think they would need to. To me, if they had such intentions, we'd never know what hit us.
Exactly. They'd already done it.
Sneak around. We couldn't stop them.
They would have done it by now.
Yeah. It would have already happened. And just the mere fact that they're still in existence suggests to me that they've overcome our warlike tendencies, you know.
Or the lust to dominate others. Yeah. Actually, what is your thought on this, Mr. Walton, is that this prime directive or this higher level of thinking is a lot of it is based on not violating free will, and that this is a basic cosmic law that you are not to violate another's free will, and they actually take that seriously. Does that sound like something?
Well, yeah, I and so the whole idea of abduction, as people typically understand it, might not be accurate. You know, I said ambulance call rather than an abduction, and there was a researcher that was telling me that she had done hypnotic regression on a number of people who thought they had had a negative experience, but came to realize later that they had medical issues resolved in a positive way later. So even though they were calling it an abduction, they later realized that they were, it's kind of like the little kid who goes to the dentist. You know, you can't convince him that the dentist is not a monster, and he's not. You can tell him all day long how much better his tooth is, but he doesn't want to repeat it. But all in all, it was for his own good.
Do you feel that's true for you?
Yeah, I do.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely do, and I think they're perfectly capable of following individuals. I used to be really skeptical of that. I thought, if there's any truth to this phenomena, that we're of such little consequence to them that they wouldn't, much care about particular individuals at all, or even identify individuals. But I don't think so anymore. I do think that they pay particular attention to individuals. And if you saw one when you were 12 and you see one when you're 34, they know it's you.
Mm-hmm. So how did you get back? How did that happen?
Well, I just woke up, and I came to pretty quickly, and it was cold. Cold air brought me awake, and there was a light above me, and I was laying on a hard surface. It was pavement, and I looked to see where the light was coming from, but it went off before I could turn my head in that direction. But I could see this craft hovering there just for a split second before it shot straight up into the sky, and without a sound this time. It was silent.
And were you clothed? Were you unclothed? What was your status?
Yes, I was clothed, and that was Hollywood, with me being found naked in the phone booth. That was
really?
Oh, okay.
Thank you for clarifying that.
As a matter of fact, my brother had the presence of mind to, when we got back to my mom's house, to take the clothes that I had on and seal them up in a clean bag, and put fresh clothes on me. And that was with an eye towards doing some forensic analysis on them.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
But because of all of the onslaught of attacks, that basically that just got overlooked and forgotten, and eventually sac got torn open and contaminated, and no follow-up research was done on those.
So you said you were in a different town. Where were you when you came back?
It was the town nearest where it happened, and it made sense that they would not try to take me back to the town where I live, because Snowflake is a big, shallow lake bed. there's no place that you could descend and drop somebody off that you wouldn't be in plain view of many people for miles around. It was just a real much more flat area. Whereas Heber was at the junction of 2 or 3 canyons, a very cliff, cliff edge sorts of steep edge canyon walls coming together, so that they were able to descend below treetop level and basically be pretty much invisible to people in any direction except the direction that I went to get back into town.
Who was the first person you made contact with when you came back?
My brother and brother-in-law. I called the family and told them where I was, and they came and got me. And I must have, passed out after making the phone call, but it seemed like just minutes before they were there. But there was a story, and there's many stories of this nature, where somebody that I knew, he was a supporter, he believed me, but he was trying to be important, like so many people that make up stories in connection with this. He claimed that when I got to that phone booth, I called him. And when he wasn't home, then I called my family. Well, that's not the way it happened. There was only one phone call, and the hysteria in my voice led the telephone operator to report it to the sheriff immediately. So she only heard one phone call. She only put one call through, and the sheriff sent officers over to but this was the middle of the night. They didn't get there as quickly as my family did. But I was clothed.
Okay, good. So how has your life changed? Well, let me ask you a better question. Do you have any relief, from all of the trauma and the unfavorable, attacks from the non-believers? Have you had any relief, or have you returned to
improved? Things have improved, and it's been I think that I've actually been somewhat successful in getting the word out, correcting these, demonstrating the proof, that these theories, trying to explain it away, can't be true. And even obtaining, through the Freedom of Information Act, the FBI file on my chief detractor, and how they had investigated him and didn't think very highly of him, considered him to be extremely irrational. But that's a kind of a vindication. Right after it happened, I would go out, and people that I knew well would see me and pretend that they didn't know me. Now I go out, and people I don't know pretend they do know me. So it's kind of positive.
Everybody wants to be my baby
funny.
now.
That's funny.
Ask for a picture, that kind of thing. I guess that's better than being people whispering and pointing and that sort of thing.
Well, do you see more of an openness now? I think there's a more open climate for ufology now than there ever has been. Do you feel that?
Yeah, there has. And, just the Pentagon conceding, and releasing the Navy gun camera footage, was a step forward. And I think that they are wise to do it incrementally, the way they're doing it. That those release back in mid-December was done in the way that releases are typically done, where they want something out there, but they don't want it to have a disproportionate amount of attention. So, I guess it's a Friday afternoon or something where it has a whole weekend to sink in, and they time these things with a reason. And so I think they wanted this information out there, but they didn't want it to have the wrong kind of reaction.
Impact. Right. I'm curious what your feelings are. There's another narrative that's going on in ufology, if you will, and that's this some of the revelations that have come out in the last 3-4 years about the so-called secret space program. What are your feelings about some of this stuff?
Well, our government has a certain level of knowledge about this phenomenon, and they're quite secretive about it, and I don't blame them. People who think that the government is somehow letting us down because they don't throw open the books and tell us exactly how much they know don't understand. We have enemies. There's other superpowers who would love to know just exactly how much technology we might have recovered, to know exactly what they can get away with. It's best to keep them guessing and not let them know just what we have. I do not believe that our government is in cahoots with evil aliens to help them take over the planet. That's totally absurd. These people have families. They live here on this planet, and I think that all in all, it is in our best interest that they not make everything known. They can't share with us without sharing with our enemies. So I do believe that they have some justifiable reasons to hold back certain things.
But more specifically, some of the folks that have come forward as, quote, whistleblowers or people who have participated in these programs that are making fantastic claims about extremely advanced technology, about contact with other civilizations in a very routine and ongoing fashion that's been going on for decades. Are you familiar with any of that? And do you have?
Well, I've heard certain rumors, and I'm not an expert on other people's reports, but I do think that there's a degree of truth to it, and sometimes some exaggeration. And I've seen. Had personal contact with people that say things that, I don't want to get specific, but, things I can tell they're telling the truth, and things where I seriously doubt it. But,
well, thanks for that. I just was kind of curious what your take might be. So that's fair enough.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a theory also on the when you were under the craft and that lightning bolt or that streak of light hit you, that could make perfect sense to me, because in order for that craft to be floating there, it had to create a gravitational bubble. And that brings my thought back to a very old video clip that I have seen from Germany, a 1945 video clip of a Haunebu flying discs that the Nazis made. When it lifted off, there were sparks coming out of the bottom of it hitting the ground. And when two objects of high gravitational force get close to each other, you have discharge between the two of them. So that could make perfect sense with that disc sitting there in a gravitational bubble, and you stuck out of the ground, so you became kind of like a grounding rod to them.
Yeah,
so
and an accident happened. Perhaps not an aggressive attack.
It kind of sounds like it was benevolent.
Well, the research on the change in the growth of the trees nearest where the craft came down was pretty interesting. I was kind of late to be fully informed of the studio, Paramount, wanted us to do an interview on the site. Well, it was the middle of winter, and there was like 2 feet of snow out there, so it was virtually, under normal circumstances, absolutely impossible to get out there. But they actually rented these big snowcats from the ski run, have these big, wide treads that are kind of like caterpillar treads, only like 4 feet across, and they stay up on top of the snow drifts. So we were actually able to get out there, film an interview on the site, and I found out later that Mike, the crew boss, had noticed some changes in the tree growth. And it wasn't just the snow fall that made it hard to find the location in the winter there. That the change in the growth of these trees was pretty substantial. And he never said anything to me, but I found out later that when the snow melted, he went out there in the spring, and he discovered that the tree that he tested had a dramatic increase in the thickness of the growth rings. Now he took a core sample, and this tree, which was actually 85 years old at the time of the incident, counting growth rings, you absolutely, you can't make a mistake. You get 1 ring for each year. And then in the next 15 years, the tree had just about exactly doubled in diameter. So 85 years gave you 3.5 inches in diameter, and then 15 more years doubled the diameter, which is actually more than double the amount of wood fiber produced, because it's the outer part of a circle. It's a larger volume of wood than the inner layers of the tree.
Yeah.
But
so this may have been a regenerative kind of energy that hit you, maybe not lightning. Maybe this was some kind of specific energy that came out of that
further
craft.
Research showed that that this is the way pine trees react when exposed to high levels of radiation. Now, during the search, Geiger counter readings did show some high readings there at the site, but what came out later was that these thickened layers of growth rings on the trees were on the side of the tree towards where the craft had been, because Mike was just taking a core sample, and just coincidentally he happened to take it from the side of the tree, where his back would have been to where the UFO was. But later, after a forest fire had killed a lot of the trees in the area, he was able to, we were actually able to get a complete cross-section of the trees. And it showed that these thickened growth rings were primarily on the side of the tree towards where the craft had been. On the opposite side, it was much reduced. So it was very directional all around the perimeter of the clearing. And the researcher, Ben Hansen, who was with us when we were looking into this expedition back to the site, went online and found that the pine trees in the vicinity of the Chernobyl nuclear accident showed the same kind of surge in growth, that they had these thickened growth rings in response to the presence of the radiation. And it was a pretty technical paper. It went into the science of why, what parts of the tree cells, or what was creating the greater mass. But I don't have a copy of the paper, so I don't know the details in that. But I just know that the Chernobyl accident had a similar effect with the presence of radiation. So,
wow.
And it did become apparent that it was pretty intense immediately, and that over time it faded. And then the outer rings actually returned to normal. And also, we were looking for any signs of residual radiation and didn't discover any. So if there was some kind of radiation that remained in the area for a while, it definitely faded away.
Amazing.
Wow. So is there any kind of a final takeaway that you've gotten, any kind of a message for humanity or anything like that? Has any of that kind of surfaced for you? Or?
Well, yeah, and people disagree with me. I'm perfectly willing to admit this is just my theory. I've had a few decades to think about this real deeply, but it's just my opinion. And I think that just the fact that there's continue to exist is kind of an indicator that they've overcome being warlike. I mean, certainly they've got things far more powerful than atomic weapons. And if they were into annihilating each other, certainly the fact that they still exist suggests to me that they've overcome that kind of approach to interacting with each other. Just their continued existence suggests to me that a proportional moral and ethical development comes with the technology.
They passed the test.
Yeah.
Which means also that there is hope for us.
Yay.
Yeah, but we are in a very crude state and a very primitive state. As badly as we treat each other on the basis of differences in our appearance, certainly to have these little 4-foot guys walking around amongst us, they could certainly expect that we would start to project attributes that they didn't really have and suspect them of being ways that,
There's a popular internet meme. There's a popular internet meme that people post, and it shows a couple of ETs, and they'll post it whenever they see somebody say something stupid. I see this on Facebook, and it shows these two ETs, and they say, "This is why we don't visit you," because of some of the
exactly
stuff that people say.
We are going to have to be ready, and
we have to grow up.
And
we're showing them that we're showing them we're not ready, and that the consequences would be destructive. So I think it's not selfish. It's actually kind of considerate that they're holding back.
What would it look like if we were ready?
I think that we would still have nation states, but have batteries of missiles pointed at each other. We've got to get beyond that kind of teetering on the brink situation. I mean, just that alone says obviously not at this point.
Yeah, amazing.
But I think there's hope for us.
Yes.
I think we're making progress, and part of it is acceptance of the reality of their existence. That's a basic step, where people would just be so traumatized to even acknowledge that they exist. Give me a break. This is so obvious. It's so overwhelmingly likely from the objective scientific point of view that it's a virtual certainty, even if you've never seen one.
Actually, we shouldn't be so surprised.
Exactly.
Yeah. What would be surprising is if there wasn't anything.
Right. And that is one of the narratives that's come out.
Would that be astonishing? Literally trillions of possibly life-supporting planets, and it's all empty. But I had people come up to me and dead serious I say, So all those trillions of stars twinkling on our night sky are just there to shine, to twinkle, something nice to look at. And they go, yeah.
Just send them down the hall to the Flat Earth Conference.
Yes.
Just the Flat Earth Conference is down the hall. You guys are down that hall down there. Okay, sorry, you're at the wrong conference.
Yeah.
Well, we started out the show by asking people to suspend their disbelief so that they can enter into the realm of exploring the possibilities. And I am so grateful that you have persisted all of these years and continuing to tell your story and to help other people come forward. So thank you so, so much.
Well, do you want to leave us any links? Now that we're kind of wrapping up, do you want to leave us any links for anything important going on, any events you're going to be at, websites?
Yeah, well, you can stay up with my schedule at my website, traviswalton.com.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Walton.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for being with us, because this was sure enlightening to me and everybody else that will be listening to this around the world. And for the ones that is in other parts of the corners of the world, like in back countries of Europe or Asia, which I know we have a lot of listeners out there in that part of the world because of our global reach now, they're going to be listening to this. And they're going to say to themselves, self, I think there is more of them than just us.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
absolutely.
Really good. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
They're here, they're watching, and we should be on our better behavior.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's time to grow up and join the community of planets that are out there.
Let me ask a quick question. If everybody truly came, Mr. Walton, from the perspective of love, do you think that would be us growing up completely and elevating our consciousness to theirs?
That would be a major factor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Amazing. I have chills. Thank you so much.
What else is the life force other than pure love?
Perfect.